Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here, welcome back to another Anthem video. And in today's video, I want to show you guys some gameplay, but this is super exciting because this, what you're seeing right now, is the complete behind closed doors demo that was shown at E3. If you guys have seen the gameplay so far from either the press conference or the 7-minute B-roll that got released, basically it is segments from this mission cut together from different perspectives to try and give you guys an idea of the overall flow, some of the different things that you'll do, so you can kind of sort of see some gameplay, but it didn't give you the complete end-to-end flow. But this video here is basically what we got to play, both myself and TwoSixNine, behind closed doors at EA Play, and today I'm going to run you guys through it, talk about some of the different aspects, some of the stuff that you will do in this demo, and just, you know, basically try and give you guys as much insight as possible. This also includes some boss battle gameplay at the very end. If you guys saw the B-roll, you'll see that the boss basically came out the ceiling, and then the video cut, whereas this time you'll actually get a chance to see that. It's super exciting, so definitely lots of cool stuff to see. So if you guys do enjoy this, a like would be super appreciated. If you have any questions, drop them down below. But let's get started. So first up, we are currently in the Strider. This is essentially one of your forward bases of operations. You do have Fort Tarsus as well, where you can kind of go back and do some of your story stuff and look at your Javelin there, but you can also go to the Strider, you can go and equip some gear here, you can customize your loadout, you can personalize your Javelin, you can of course dive in, and you can go from here to embark on missions and to invite your friends as well. This screen right here is of course our chance to pick the mission, but first up we're going to invite some friends. So we're going to start off by inviting 2 different players, then the third player will actually join us in progress throughout the mission. But if we then dive back, we get a look at the map screen. You can see a variety of different activities here, plenty of cool stuff to talk about, and this is stuff that I will probably go into much greater detail in a later video, but for the time being, they're selecting the Scars of Villainy mission. This is of course take them into the Stronghold, which is the bigger, more challenging 4-player activity, which has a boss, loot, that sort of stuff. So now that we're outside of the Strider, we can actually begin the mission itself. So currently the team setup is 2 Colossus and 1 Ranger. As mentioned, there will be someone that jumps in progress a little bit later on. That will be the Storm. But to begin with, 2 Colossus, 1 Ranger. The Colossus is of course the bigger, tankier Javelin. You can also see the Ranger doing some emotes over there. But the Colossus being the bigger, tankier one, trade-off for that power is of course less agility, mobility and whatnot when compared to something like, of course, Storm or Ranger. But you'll also notice that the 2 Colossus there, they do look different. There's of course the more typical one that you're seeing the perspective of right here. This has like a shoulder mounted cannon, it has a rocket on the arm as well, whereas the other one with the white paint job has a more close range setup or close range kind of loadout. It has a flamethrower, and more of the moves are kind of geared towards actually attacking slightly more close range. It is worth mentioning, there was a tweet from Mark Dara to explain that there's not at launch going to be any actual melee focused builds. Every class or every Javelin, so to speak, has the ability to do melee attacks, but you won't actually have like any melee spec builds. But you can still have close range builds if you want to, hence why you have things like, you know, shotguns or flamethrowers, those sort of things. Either way, general gameplay, of course, Colossus, big, hefty weapons, really, really satisfying to use. This is something that obviously you won't necessarily be able to convey too much by watching, but just the meat and the kind of the way that you feel when you fire the guns feels really, really satisfying. It's just like, you know, there's a good weight to them. They feel really like the audio is really good when you kind of hear them firing, and just in general, feels great to actually shoot at the weapons. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about here. You saw some loot pop up there. You also saw some loot get picked up just a moment ago. The way that loot works in this is a little bit different. In fact, it's kind of, I guess, sort of similar in some aspects if you guys have played Destiny. When you pick up weapons in the game, you don't actually, you know, they just picked up a legendary weapon. It came up on the side, had a little sort of like hand cannon icon or like a pistol. You can't then just go straight into your inventory and equip that. You have to then go and decode that. So you can either go back to your Strider, or you can go back to Fort Tarsus and you then need to decode or decrypt, whatever kind of word they decide to use for it, and essentially then turn that into or decipher what that loot is before you can begin equipping it. So, you know, there's kind of pros and cons to that system. I do quite like the feeling of being able to kind of get a loot drop and initially just like look at it immediately and be like, oh, this is really cool, I'm going to equip it to my character, maybe use it and just change what you're doing like on the fly. But at the same time, there is also some kind of, you know, fun aspects to going back and then decrypting things and being like, oh, this is really, really awesome. So I'm kind of hoping they might have like a balance of that. It'd be really nice if there are some items that you actually find, you know, dedicated items you can actually see and collect in the world. versus some that are, you know, more so loot drops. Anyway, speaking about the dropping in progress, the Storm, of course, joined here. Now, this is an interesting thing as well, something they mentioned in the developer commentary. In this particular setup, the 3 characters that started to begin with, the 2 Colossus and the Ranger, they're actually level 30. That Storm is level 1. Now, they said that it's possible that different players of different levels can play together. Their level 1 player can come in, they can earn gear, they can earn experience, things like that. So we don't quite know how exactly that will work just yet, whether there's any kind of scaling to it, whether there's any sort of, you know, element of, you know, whether you can actually power level your character things. But at least if you are playing with people that are of different levels, if say, you know, your friends have to work and they've missed some stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fall behind and suddenly you can't play with them. You can bring them in, and I'd like to think you can kind of have like a power leveling element to it, because it'd be quite nice if you could be like, oh yeah, don't worry, we've done this activity, we'll run you through, we'll you know, we'll bring you through and kind of like do some stuff like that. The thing they just passed, that was of course the Ash Titan. That is an example of like a world event. That is basically, those sort of things will appear around. Now, they weren't powerful enough to fight that right now. That is pretty meaty. When we were playing the demo, we also weren't allowed to fight it because it basically wasn't balanced at the time, so it would have basically killed us in one shot. But either way, those sort of things will appear in the world when you're exploring around. There'll be other events as well, but those are examples of things that you would just encounter purely by exploring. And of course, when you do actually take them down, there will be loot and stuff like that tied to that. Now, currently they're entering the Stronghold. They actually found a secret entrance through the water. Strongholds, once you discover them, you will actually be able to access them from your map. So the map we saw earlier, once the Stronghold has actually been discovered, you can then just access it, you know, before you even embark on your expedition. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier, this being a Stronghold, Strongholds are 4-player activities. They're designed to give you greater challenges and also greater loot in the process. If you want to draw any comparisons from like other games within this genre, then they're basically your dungeons, right? They'll have objectives, they'll have bosses, they'll have cool loot at the end, ideally, so definitely the sort of things that you want to spend some time in. Now, they're actually at the entrance right now. You can, of course, see there are mines listed around the cave system. Plenty of different ways you can encounter this, or you can kind of deal with this. You could have flown over it, shot them, but good example of why the Colossus is so tanky. You can just deploy your shield, firm it, and just run through. And honestly, I can see myself using the Colossus endgame because while the Storm looks really cool, and of course Interceptor, there's a lot of questions because nobody really knows about it, I kind of just like the feeling of being a hefty tank and just running towards people and just being like, yep, I am going to firm everything you throw at me. But anyway, combo abilities, first up you saw there, the Storm brought down a lightning strike and the Colossus then used the arm-mounted cannon. You can then kind of combo those together to do powerful attacks, and of course this is really useful in high level activities for dispatching some of those tougher enemies. I did mention this during my feedback, so I'm hoping they do sort of take it on, but I really do hope they address that font, because while damage numbers and the kind of combo things are important for visual feedback, I just feel like they need to be much, much more subtle. I feel like they should be a lot smaller, a lot more faint, but either way, hopefully that's something they can address a little bit later on. But anyway, on to the objective. So they're now working towards this relic. That big thing you see in the background, that's a relic. There are loads of these listed around the world. They will factor into various different aspects of gameplay, but in the context of this mission, we need to deactivate it or silence the relic, so to speak. So you do that by, you drop in here, and there's loads of different orbs around here which you need to collect. You then take them to the interface, and you can then use that to shut it down. Now, different groups of enemies. Up on the right, you have your snipers. Down in the middle, you have like your kind of random mob enemies. You have some slightly stronger elite enemies. And up on the left, you have the sentry turrets. It's quite funny, actually, because when we played this at the demo, like at E3, TwoSixNine was in the kind of in the reins, in control, and the developer was sitting there explaining the situation, and he was like, right, how do you want to address this? There's loads of different ways you can kind of do it. You can go in, you know, slightly more stealthily. We can dispatch enemies differently. And 2.6 was just like Leroy Jenkins and just ran straight forward, headlong in. We cleared it all out. It's kind of funny, but either way, there's different ways to dispatch these enemies. But as you see there, the orb is on our back. This is working towards the objective. You can actually carry multiples. They basically float around you. And once you have them, you then work towards the interface. We can deploy them. Up in the top corner, you can see we've got currently 0 out of 6, but then once we actually store it and we return there, that'll start working towards the objective. We also just passed the red orb. Now, I've mentioned this in a couple of videos before, but if you guys missed that, the way that health works in this game, you have a shield and you have health. Now, your shield will regen, your health will not. So when you're in fights, you have to kill enemies, and when you kill them, they drop red orbs. You can see another one over there on the left. When you pick that up, that gives you health back. Now, interesting system. Not entirely sure where I am on it at the moment. Like, there's some odd ways about kind of the way that it feels, because sometimes you go in when you're on full health, full shield, and you feel like a super powered, super like mech, and you run in and you feel like a boss. And then if you don't get enough red orbs, the next fight you kind of go in and you feel a little bit less powerful. So I feel like there's a little bit of fine tuning to be done there, but either way, that's currently how it works. You have to pick up orbs to heal, but of course your shield will regen over time. Now, going back to abilities right there, you saw, of course, the shoulder-mounted cannon. You can, of course, see the close-range setup Colossus using the flamethrower to set targets on fire. But one thing that's really interesting, and this is kind of another comment on loot. So this shoulder-mounted cannon here is not just any cannon. It's not like a bog standard one. That's actually a legendary item. So a couple of the configurations in this this demo run through have legendary items. You have the Colossus that we've got, which has that multi-shoulder mounted rocket. It fires off, of course, multiple rockets as opposed to one individual rocket. And then there's the Ranger who has the Frost Grenade. Now that's really cool because it's interesting to know that the loot extends to more than just your weapon. Of course, we know you can configure your loadout. We know you can get things like flamethrowers and stuff. But, you know, without kind of knowing that beforehand, I thought maybe they were slightly more limited, and of course then the variety comes in your weapons, but that's not true. Obviously we now know that that extends to much more than just weapons. Of course, it extends to the rest of your loadout, so that means you can eventually get to the point where you have some really cool configurations and hopefully plenty of different ways to play, especially when you factor in that some of the rarer items do also offer you additional abilities, or, you know, the fact that we now have a multi-rocket on the shoulder cannon. You kind of think to yourself, alright, how is that going to extend to, say, you know, is there going to be like a super legendary flamethrower that behaves very differently? Is there going to be like a, you know, a different kind of legendary version for, say, like the Storm's abilities, things like that. Plenty of cool stuff. So hopefully this does mean lots and lots of exciting loot. But anyway, they now completed that section of the objective. They have silenced the relic. They're now working towards the final segment. Now, when you go inside the cave, you're going to start seeing and fighting some drastically different enemies. Of course, up until now, we've been fighting some of the enemies of the Scar, but now you're going to start going in and fighting like spider/scorpion type enemies. So, you know, different engagements and whatnot. And there's plenty of eggs around here because, of course, if you've seen the boss from the end of the previous gameplay, then what you're effectively going towards is like a big spider-esque monster. It's not a spider. You'll see what it is very soon. But either way, this is also really cool. This is also quite nice to kind of go inside and just sort of see a very different environment as well. We've been through these lush forests, we've been flying over the top of these canyons and stuff, and now we're in a very sort of like murky, dingy, dark, ominous looking cave. Some of the new enemies here, of course, you can see fighting off waves of these scuttling spider/scorpions. So definitely things you need to watch out for, because these ones, they move quite fast, and if you don't keep your on top of them, they do have a tendency to overrun. So they're then going to jump forward. This actually happened when we were playing the demo as well. They kind of didn't let us run through the entire cave system because I can only imagine it's quite big, and they were trying to keep the demos quite small and quite limited. So at this point, everyone was just jumped forward, and we were taken to like what's effectively the last little run through just before getting to the boss. So, you know, I would like to think these as activities. I mean, this demo, the whole thing from, you know, going from the Strider all the way through to getting to the boss and getting to, like, you know, the fight took us about 20 minutes, but that includes the fact that there was a section that was actually skipped out, and of course they were also guiding us through. So if you, like, you know, the first time you ever fight this, I'd imagine the actual activity, if you're wondering kind of rough length, is probably going to push somewhere in the realms of like 30 to 40 minutes. And then, you know, once you start to know it and you get more efficient, you'll probably be able to do it a little bit quicker. But either way, you're looking at kind of like that rough time span for some of your activities.
You're supposed to tell me.
Right. Just be careful.
Now, something interesting for those of you guys that want to kind of experience more of Anthem's story, more of Anthem's lore, and kind of just learn more about the game, the world, things like that. What the character's walking towards right now, this is essentially a little rune, and some of these are listed around the world again. When you discover them, this will, you know, obviously factor into some of the collectible and kind of discoverable aspects in the world. So for those of you guys that are completionists, collectors, and things like that, then that in itself will give you a reason to go after things. But also for those of you guys wanting more from the story, those sort of things tie into the lore. So if you want to discover more and understand, you know, this world and, you know, ultimately what led us to be where we are, then there's going to be value in kind of going after those things. So this final section, this is of course going towards the final boss fight right now. If you guys saw the B-roll or the gameplay that was released around E3 or from some of my videos, then you get to the point where the boss, which is called a Swarm Tyrant, comes out of the ceiling like this, and then that's basically where the footage stopped. But of course in this video we get to take on the actual boss itself. You get to actually see some gameplay, which is really, really cool. So it is kind of, for all intents and purposes, a big space spider. The front is heavily armoured. On the back there are 3 sacks, which are of course the weak spots. It has a variety of different moves. It's got some, like, you saw the projectile moves there where it fires out these kind of webs which will tie you down and restrict you and whatnot. Of course, if you get too close, it's got like a front-on melee attack. So generally speaking, you want to try and fly around and you want to try and, you know, put some damage on the back of it and focus on those weak spots. Of course, you're going to, this is where some of those combo abilities are going to come in. This is where you're going to want to start using some of your special abilities, your ultimates, things like that. You saw the Colossus do a quick melee attack there. As mentioned, all characters, all javelins have a basic melee just for kind of clearing things out in front of you. But of course, you know, that's not necessarily going to be like an actual melee focused build. Again, using that legendary shoulder mounted cannon to do some nice damage there. But you can also see some of the other combos coming in. So the Colossus with the flamethrower is able to set the target on fire to do some tick damage. And there was, of course, also the Storm doing the lightning strike down on top of that as well. Now, the general boss flow, the way that you kind of fight it, you'll of course do some damage to it for a little bit, and there will also be some of these smaller trash mobs that are coming around. You need to deal with them as well so you don't get overrun. But there will come a point like this where you basically burst one of the sacks on the back. It then gives you an opportunity to do some good damage, but then once you've done enough damage, the boss will then essentially retreat for a phase. At that point, it's down to you to manage some of the ads. So it's doing that right now. It's going into the retreat phase. So once it runs up the wall, you're basically going to have to then deal with some of the ads coming out of the doors. So this is sort of like how you're going to manage the fight. You know, you'll do some damage, you'll burst one of the sacks, you'll then deal with some ads, and you'll then kind of repeat it from there. See, in this situation, there's a kind of chokehold here, so this is a good opportunity to try and lock it down with different things. You of course see the frost grenade coming in there. You can then lay down some fire from the flamethrower attack, and of course you can also link up some of your combo abilities. So this is just a good way to, you know, to try and deal with them. But bear in mind, if this was slightly more hectic, or perhaps you didn't focus on this, or, you know, your teamwork wasn't necessarily all there, then they would then spread among the room, and it would then be down to you to try and sort of, you know, deal with them. But once you've dealt with them, boss comes back out, and you then continue fighting, and that's essentially sort of how it plays out. Now, during the demo, and even in this footage, we didn't get to defeat the boss, because as you can see, you know, even kind of in this first fight, we've only done like, you know, say a fifth of its health. There's not like a great deal of damage done so far, so this would go on for quite a while, and obviously they want to try and keep it a secret, and, you know, not necessarily show us what happens afterwards, so the little bit at the end essentially remains a mystery. But that's ultimately where this demo is going to end. So for the time being, that's it. We also, of course, do get a look at the Colossus using the ultimate ability, which is like a really powerful kind of hand-mounted rocket. It basically fires out nukes. Really, really cool. But that, my friends, is pretty much it. That was a look at the behind closed doors demo from E3. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you have any questions, let me know down below. But otherwise, thank you for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.